Hey you guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to learn how to make gathers with the muslin, of course. And this is an overview on what it will look like. Are you ready? If you have not subscribed to the channel, please do so. Like, share, and comment below if you have any questions. So gathering is relatively easy. The first thing you need to do is extend your stitch length. So I extended it out so that it's almost like a basting stitch, which is for my sewing machine, it's 5.0. And the other one over here that I'm touching, this one is the actual width. So you have the length and the width. The width will shift the needle over to the left or right. Now this brother sewing machine, it has shifted it over. Therefore, it's allowing you to have a smaller seam allowance if you're still going to keep that seam allowance matched up to the 1/2 inch. Once you shift the needle over, it gives you a smaller seam allowance. Make sure before you start that your thread is relatively long and is hanging off the edge. You're not going to backstitch for this section here. You're just going to go straight forward. So the very thing you need to know is to have long threads hanging, like here. As you can see, I pulled it far apart, and no back stitching. Since you are gathering, be sure to start like at least a 1/2 inch from the edge. As you can see here, I gave it like a 1/2 inch, just some spacing, so that when you are placing it in place and you have to have like an adjoining seam, it doesn't become an issue. Once you've created your first stitch, you're going to create another row of stitches. You can shift the fabric over so that you have your spacing in between. You can keep it like one can be 1/8 from the edge of the fabric for seam allowance, and then the second stitch line would be 1/4 away. So here we went from 7, and I'm just playing with the stitches. As you can see here, the needle, it shifts over to the right and to the left just by adjusting the stitch width. So now you are ready, and you just go ahead and you hold your thread in the back. That way it doesn't get pulled into the machine. Secure your fabric in the front so that it doesn't, shift out of place and end up crisscrossing over your original gathering line. And you just go straight through. Once you are done, again, don't backstitch, extend that thread out, and now you are ready for the next step. The next part here will be to tie the threads. So you have your needle thread at the top, and you have your bobbin thread at the bottom. Your fabric should be sandwiched in the middle. You're going to add some knots on both needle threads. As you can see, I've already separated it, and you'll do the same for the bobbin threads. This prevents the fabric from shifting down the thread and causing your gathers to be uneven. You'll do the same for both ends. So be sure that you separate them. Needle threads will be tied together and bobbin threads are together. Once you have your knots in place on both bobbin and both needle threads, you can go ahead and fold your material in half so that you can find your center. Now, ideally, it would be best for you to find the center of your garment prior to adding those stitches, because sometimes it'll just doing that will gather the fabric with the feed dogs underneath the machine. But I didn't do that before, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it now. And you'll do the same for the adjoining piece. So that way, that notch on your material that's going to be gathered will be lined up to the material that it's going to be sewn onto. I'm just marking my 1/2 inch. That shows me where a seam would go. Therefore, there would be no notches past, I'm sorry, not notches, no gathers past that point. That's like my stopping point for the gathers. And then I would do the same thing on the other side. Mark it at a 1/2 inch. Now from there, you can hold your threads together. So you grab your your needle thread. Go ahead and grab your needle thread. Since they are separated, go ahead and grab it and just gently tug and shift your fabric down the shaft. I mean, I guess you could call it a shaft, but shift the fabric down the thread. It'll slowly gather. Try to not put too much pressure on it, otherwise it will, sometimes the thread can snap. If it does snap, you can add some stitches along the area where it snapped, and then you'll have to tie those ends together so that they work together in, moving the fabric over. Try to make your gathers as even as possible. That's always the tricky part. And then from there, the first thing you do is you match where you added your notch, your marking. You could use a pen. Try to stay off of the thread. And then from there, you can extend it so that it lines up to the seam allowance marking that we did at a 1/2 inch away. Do the same thing for the other side. It's always easier to put more gathers than needed, and then from there you could expand it out versus not having enough gathers and then having to scrunch them in while it's pinned. So always try to make it a little bit smaller, and then you can adjust it like so. Try to make them as even as possible. Very good. And once it's nice and flat and even, then you can add some additional pins to keep it in place. And what you'll do is you'll top stitch, you'll sew right on top of that. Now, when you have gathers, it's always best that the shifty fabric or the gathered material, the area that has more, always go on top of the feed dog. Which is the bottom section of your sewing machine, just so that it's able to pull it across and it moves with the direction of the fabric. If you put it at the top, sometimes the presser foot will press into it and it'll shift your gathers down the opposite way. So all of your gathers will be bunched up in one section. Always remember to put your gathers down facing the feed dogs. I almost forgot. Before you start sewing your gathers down, be sure to reset your machine. So before we had it, I believe it was like 5. Anyway, I don't remember what the stitch was. But reset it from your basting stitch for the gathers back to a regular stitching. So the regular stitch length should be 2.5, and you should also shift your needle back into position, which it should be at 0, depending on your machine. Just with my machine, the embroider sewing SE400, when you reset it, it goes back to 2.5 and 0 for the stitch width. Now that you've sewn it all the way across, the next thing would be to take a look and make sure that everything is looking good on the front side and everything looks nice and even. Every now and then though, okay, let's just say this was like a long garment or something long that you would have to gather. Always make sure that you're tugging gently on the gathers just so that they don't pinch and fold out of place. This is where you take a look, make sure everything looks good. There isn't anything overlapping or crisscrossing. Everything is sandwiched in. And now you can go ahead and clip your extra threads because that is done. Whatever you would want to do to the seam allowance, right now would be a good time to do so. So if you're going to serge it, you go ahead and you serge it. And if you're going to top stitch, you can serge first and then top stitch after. But for this example, I decided to show it as if it was in a casing. So you just fold that edge over, and then from there, if you want, you can top stitch it, or you can hand stitch it to make it nice and clean on the opposite side. And that would pretty much be it for this. All right, you guys, we are all done for today. This is what it's looking like. I would love to show you guys how to put this together for a skirt. There has been some popular ruffled skirts that's been out there. That's, I wouldn't say in season, but it's just popular right now. So maybe I'll show you a video with making those type of skirts with this type of technique, gathering. And yeah, as you learn new skills, it's very important to implement it into different ideas and different garments. That's how you build your skill set, and that's what we are here to do. Thank you again for watching. You guys have a wonderful day. I will see you next time. Peace, love, and happiness. Happy sewing.